need you anymore, dude.
I can make it.
I'm beyond. No, no, you can't. Okay, go for it. Go on. You got it, I believe. You got it. Keep going.
Hey, shoot your eyes, shoot your eyes.
Okay, yep, I turn away.
Wait, I did it,
Hello everybody and welcome back to another Cyber Slat video. Today we're focusing on my second least favorite dungeon, Siege of Boralus. So let's keep this interesting, okay? So once you make it into the dungeon, you've got 3 major enemies to face before the first boss. 3 dangerous mobs that you want to look out for. The first one would be the Halberd, which will do a slobber knocker ability, which if you're the tank, you want to make sure that you're positioning these guys away from the rest of your group. And obviously if you're a DPS, don't be a dum-dum, never stack on tank. Next would be the Wave Tender, which has 2 main abilities. One is a bolt ability, which you just want to interrupt and just avoid taking that incoming damage. The second, however, is way more serious. It is a shield that the Wave Tender will put on surrounding mobs. Now, once this shield breaks, it will cause an AoE stun and damage effect to all the surrounding players. So you want to make sure that you either don't let this spellcast go through, or you have somebody purge it off. So your Blood Elf Racial, or if you've got a Demon Hunter or Shaman, or I believe Mage can purge it as well. You want to make sure that you're doing that. Alternatively, if you don't have a purge, you want to wait until the shield is going to break and move out of it before it does. And the last mob that you're going to deal with in this first section of the dungeon is the Marksman. The Marksman is just going to select players at random and do a high-powered shoot ability at them, which you just want to make sure you're either stunning, using defensives for, or just cleaving down that mob as quickly as possible. A lot of groups you'll notice will try and focus the Halberd down first, the Slobber Knocker boys. Slobber Knocker boys, that's actually a really good name for a band, isn't it? Alright, well I'm copywriting that. But on with the video. You want to watch out for these Slobber Knocker boys, yes, that's fine, but as long as you're not standing in their AoE frontal, you're all good. So what you actually want to do is focus down the Marksman, and then just be interrupting the spellcast of the Wave Tender, and avoiding the Halberd. The first thing you'll notice once you reach this first boss is that it is different on Horde or if you're on Alliance. However, as 99% of the player base is on Horde, as any well-designed game should have a faction imbalance, I'm going to focus on the Horde side. When dealing with this boss, you'll first notice that there are 2 side mobs. One is a Marksman, which you want to focus down as quickly as possible. And the second is a mob which does a heavy slam AoE ability, which will stun everybody. So you want to make sure that that is faced away from the rest of the group, and even stunned if you can. Once these initial mobs are dead, there will continuously be more mobs that spawn. However, if you can hard chain CC these mobs, then you will stop these mobs from continuing to be summoned. Periodically throughout the fight as well, these bombs will drop on the floor. You want to make sure that if you're the person being followed or being focused by the boss, that you are kiting the boss into these bombs. Now the way that this focusing gaze works is that if you have a ranged player in the group, the boss will randomly target ranged players and start to follow them. However, if you don't have any ranged players in your group, including monk healers or holy paladins, they count as melee players by the way, then you will be focused randomly as melee players as well. So you want to make sure that you're always moving out from the boss whenever this gaze is coming in, so he doesn't quickly target you and smack you. But back to the point of once you are targeted by the boss, you want to make sure that you're kiting him into the bombs. Once the boss hits one of these bombs, he will take increased amounts of damage for a short period of time. So this is when you want to Bloodlust, this is when you want to pop your cooldowns and try and burst the boss down in this window. The boss will also do this hook ability on occasion, in which he will grab or grapple onto the player that he is focusing, and he will try and desperately pull them in. So what you actually want to do is turn around, quickly move into the boss, and then use some kind of speed increase ability to quickly move out of this AoE circle that the boss is going to do. What the spotter mob will do is it will target specific random players, and it will mark them for these bombardments. This player can then stack on top of any harmful mobs, and it will cause these mobs to just get obliterated, just annihilated completely. Especially if it's a bolstering week, you can actually bolster this spotter, causing them to do even more damage. However, making use of this spotter does not just trivialize the dungeon. You still have to have good bombardment control, as well as ensuring that you're looking after this spotter to the best of your ability here. Now I find that the best way to handle having these bombardments is to, as a group, always make sure that you're stacked up on the tank, so that if it hits you, you're not wasting shots, because you've got to run into the tank first. Next, I would mention that you can actually drop 2 bombs down before you have to move out of the initial blast radius. You see a lot of people, they'll drop 1 circle down, then they'll move, drop another, and then move another. And it causes the group to have to shuffle around and causes, disorder there. So what you actually want to do is you want to stay in position, and then you literally move like 1 foot over, just so that then you can see when the second bomb drops, because it will overlap with that first circle. Then you would move slightly into that second circle that you've created, then into the third, then into the fourth. And what that means is that all of your bombs are in one place, but it's the least possible disruption to the rest of your group, because no one really needs to move very far. You then see a lot of groups will start incorporating this shroud skip at this position in the dungeon. I'd say it's a very good group to skip, because you don't have access to a spotter here. And also the commander in this pack will not be damaged by the spotter. So the spotter cannot harm itself or commanders or some of the giants later on in the dungeon. Once you make it into the second boss room, you want to look out for this Cannoneer, which will do a broadside ability, and it hits pretty much level with anything in front of the mob. A lot of mobs will do like this conal ability. His is like a full sweep, so you want to be very, it's like 180 degrees, so you want to be very, very careful. Once you make it onto the second boss, you can do this with the spotter still in the group. We just use entangling root cycles to make sure that the spotter isn't hitting anyone. Having this spotter alive will help us later on in the dungeon and help us get to the third boss even quicker. But what this second boss does specifically, after a specific amount of time, the boss will leap away and exit the fight, and then summon these adds. When these adds get summoned, you can CC the deckhands with entangling roots, monk paralysis, cage, hunted trap, anything like that. Any hard CCs. But then once you kill this Cannoneer, he will drop his cannon. You want to pick that up and you want to shoot it in any direction, and it will summon the boss back. I would save any bloodlust and hard cooldowns for when the boss has re-emerged for the first time. So once you initiate the encounter, after about 10 seconds, the boss will jump away. But once she comes back, she'll be in the fight for around about 30 or 40 seconds or so. So you don't want to waste cooldowns on the first 10 seconds of the fight, and then she quickly disappears. So keep that in mind. Of course, you want to look out for these swirly effects on the ground. If you haven't figured out in this series yet, I'm basically just here to tell you that there's a swirly under your feet, okay? And if you haven't learned to move out of them by this point, video 6, I believe, then we're all doomed. But yes, just move out of these, look out for the pattern, and just make sure you avoid these. Once you make it past the second boss, would you believe the mob type switches up again? I'm starting to notice a pattern here, Blizzard. The first mob that you'll encounter is the Pillager mob, which will do a vicious slobber. There's all kinds of slobber going on in this dungeon. Who knew pirates was so nasty, you know what I mean? So these little Murlocky boys will be doing this vicious slobber. As a tank, you want to face this mob away from the rest of the group. However, there is no avoiding it. A lot of mobs will, once they start a spell cast, they will stay positioned in that manner. However, some mobs are fluid, and they will ebb and flow with the tank depending on wherever they're positioning. So you want to make sure that you're continuously tanking this away from the rest of the group. Also, you have the Buccaneers, which will be throwing out these banana swirls all over the ground, and they are notoriously difficult to spot. And lastly, we have the Demolisher, which is just a hulking giant mob that will have 2 main abilities. It will do a crashing slam, again a frontal in front of the mob itself, which as a tank you want to position this away from the rest of the group, as well as a fear ability. Now this fear ability got changed from how it used to work. It used to just be an AoE fear that had to be LOS'd or line of sighted. However, nowadays it's just a small swirl that you have to move out of and back in again. If you do have a shaman in your group, however, they can tremor totem this, which is really, really cool, really, really helpful, especially with these little bananas around. You try and quickly move out of the fear, and oh, boom, there's a banana under your toes. Classic Mario Kart syndrome, eh? However, in our group, we are making use of this spotter mob to help us deal with these mobs quickly. But again, do be careful with these bananas and these swirlies and these slants and these vicious slobbers. There's a lot to look out for. So try and keep it as simple as possible for your specific group. Everybody's different, and we deal with different mechanics in different ways. For some people, swirlies are easily visible. For others, it's the death of them. I play with an unholy DK friend, and anytime there is a ground mechanic, we just accept his fate. So there is a cool trick that you can use in this dungeon, and it involves standing up on these stairs here if you are a rogue. And what you can do is you can grappling hook across the way to the other side of this furniture pile here. Then what you can do is you can mount up on a 2-person mount, kick off the 2 vendors, back it up, have the rest of your group stand on this little pile here where I'm positioning, and they can click on the person's mount and hop over to the other side of this furniture. So what it means is you can skip most of this trash here without having to incorporate like a rogue shroud or anything if you had to use it, or if you're going to look to use it later on in the dungeon. So it's quite a cool technique if you manage to get your mob percentage elsewhere. I think you can also make use of a warlock gateway here, or well, I know you can make use of a warlock gateway here. So if you have either of those in your group, definitely a benefit to use. Once you make it up to the room just before the 3rd boss, there's a pack of snipers as well as the final spotter of the dungeon. So if you have a spotter that's been trailing you so far, you can kill them off and then get access to this new spotter. A cool trick with this pack of mobs is you can hard CC all of them, so you can Sap Blind, Monk, Paralysis, Demon Hunter Cage. I believe you can Polymorph, though check me on that. I don't play with a whole lot of mages, and that kind of thing, maybe potential Hunter Trap and that kind of stuff. So any hard CCs, get all these mobs locked in position out of combat, all hard CC'd. And then with the spotter, you can just have your whole group stand on this exact position and just drop all of these bombs on these mobs. The reason being is it will cause all of these mobs to die from the bombs without it breaking any of the hard CC. You then get into the 3rd boss room, which has 3 packs of trash mobs. These mobs themselves are kind of dangerous. They do a stacking poison debuff, which stacks up to 5 times. It will mainly target your tank, though if he does drop aggro, it can target other people in your group. You want to make sure that you are coordinating with your healer to be dispelling these as quickly as possible. You can kill most of these mobs here with the spotter. However, you want to look out for the commander, especially on, say, a bolstering week, because if all of these mobs die and you're just left with the commander, well, then he's going to bolster up infinitely. As well, your group wants to actually just funnel all of their DPS into the commander, because everything else is wasted damage because it's going to die to the spotter anyway. Watch out for the trample that the commander is going to intermittently be using, because this will target a random direction and cause a stun effect if it does hit anybody in your group. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to record the 3rd or 4th boss with this group, as I think we ended up kind of depleting pretty heavily, so I turned my recorder off in anger. But I did go back through recently and do a +7 key of this boss. This boss itself is actually pretty cool. You want to make sure that as a group you are all stacking in one position behind the boss. This will encourage all of the breakwaters to be positioned in one place, which gives you a lot more room to play with on this boss. There will also be a crashing tide effect targeted at the tank. Now as a tank, a lot of people will quickly move out of this and run away. However, if you just edge closer to the boss, you'll see that there's a little gap between the crashing tide and where the boss is positioned. And so you could just stand in that location and you never get hit by the crashing tide. And you can allow these tides to just overlap and overlap. Or you can make a really nice phallic symbol with cooperation with the rest of your group. The last thing that you want to look out for on this boss is the Tidal Search, which will periodically be used. All you need to do is line of sight this wave behind the pillar. So I would recommend as a group not positioning at all anywhere near this pillar or this statue even, so that then these breakwaters aren't going to give you any trouble. As the breakwater, if you stand in that ice ground effect, you will take a lot of damage and you will likely die in a couple of ticks. Once you get onto the last boss, I mean this boss, again, if you haven't depleted already, you can have 8 minutes left on this boss and you will deplete by 15 minutes, I promise you that. What you want to do, or the best way I've kind of found to deal with this last boss, is to have everybody focus the Demolisher Tentacle. You want to burn this down as quickly as possible. You then move on to the Gripping Tentacle whenever there isn't a Demolisher available. Depending on what level key you do, you can just burst this Gripping Tentacle down very, very quickly. And the way I would recommend doing this is to use all of your cooldowns on the first platform. Once you move on to the second platform, use a Bloodlust. And then on the 3rd and final platform, you should have your cooldowns back up again in order to deal with the final Gripping Tentacle. The reason for this, as well is that the tentacles on the first platform are more or less nicely grouped up together so that you can cleave. Again, on the third platform, a lot of the tentacles are nicely grouped up so that you can cleave. However, on the second, none of the tentacles spawn anywhere near this gripping tentacle, so it causes a lot of back and forth movement with your group. So for time efficiency, I think bloodlusting on this platform is quite smart. Though bloodlusting on the third platform is, you know, just as good, just as good. The thing you want to look out for here are these swirlies on the ground. The swirlies on the ground. You want to make sure you're not standing in any of those. As well, there's going to be a debuff effect that will target 2 players at random. As the healer, you want to make sure that you're looking out for these debuffs and dispelling them as quickly as possible. Obviously, you only have 1 dispel available at a time, so the person that isn't getting dispelled, you want to make sure that they're using a defensive, they're using health pots, and that your target healing them. One thing to note on that dispel is as soon as that dispel occurs, or the spell effect runs out, any surrounding players that are in that circle will get knocked up into the air and sent flying back. So you want to make sure that as a group, you're realizing who has the debuff on them and you're kind of giving everybody a bit of room. But that's pretty much it with this last boss. Honestly, I think it's a voodoo magic if you survive the third boss trash room and this last boss. There's no secret, there's no trick. It's literally just, it's gas and air. It's magic. And as always, everybody, thank you for watching another video. I hope you guys are enjoying this series so far. And as always, you can get at me in the comments section if you have any suggestions to make. Or you can check me out live at twitch.tv/cybestslat and you can ask any of those questions to me directly. Alright, see you in the next one.